The boxes were still stacked in Bryce's hallway when I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. It had been exactly 2 weeks since I'd moved in with him, and I was standing there in his pristine kitchen, watching him organize his spice rack alphabetically when it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't space. This was me running away from the best thing that had ever happened to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where it all started falling apart. His name was James Whitmore, and he had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. We'd been together for almost 2 years, and I thought I knew everything about love until I met him. James was the kind of man who remembered that I liked my coffee with just a splash of cream, who would drive across town to bring me soup when I was sick, who listened, really listened, when I talked about my day at the veterinary clinic. The problem wasn't James. The problem was me, and my complete inability to recognize a good thing when it was staring me right in the face. I was 28, convinced I had all the time in the world to figure out what I wanted. James was 31, and he knew exactly what he wanted: a life with me. He'd started talking about marriage, about buying a house together, about the future we could build. And instead of feeling excited, I felt trapped. The worst part is, I can pinpoint the exact moment when everything started to unravel. It was a Tuesday night in September, and James had cooked dinner for us, his famous chicken parmesan that I'd been craving all week. We were sitting at his small dining table, the one he'd built himself from reclaimed wood, and he was telling me about his day at the architecture firm where he worked. "Sarah from HR pulled me aside today," he said, cutting into his chicken. "She asked if I was planning to propose soon because apparently I light up whenever I talk about you." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was between you and me," he said, smiling. "But she's not wrong. I do light up when I talk about you." Instead of feeling warm and loved, I felt a surge of panic. The walls of his cozy apartment seemed to close in around me, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I set down my fork and excused myself to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. What was wrong with me? Here was this incredible man who loved me, who wanted to build a life with me, and all I could think about was how trapped I felt. I looked at my reflection and saw someone who was 28 and had never lived alone, who had gone from her parents' house to college to various relationships without ever figuring out who she was as an individual. When I came back to the table, James was clearing our plates. He looked at me with concern. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. That night, lying in James's bed while he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and felt like I was suffocating. I loved him. God, I loved him so much it scared me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was disappearing into our relationship. The next few weeks were torture. James continued being his wonderful, attentive self, and I continued spiraling into a panic I couldn't explain. I started picking fights about stupid things: how he loaded the dishwasher, his habit of leaving his shoes by the door, the way he hummed while he worked on his weekend projects. He took it all in stride, probably thinking I was just stressed about work. "Maybe you should take a vacation," he suggested one evening after I'd snapped at him for rearranging my books on his shelf. "You've been working a lot of overtime lately." "I don't need a vacation," I said, knowing even as I said it that I was being unfair. "I need more ease." "What?" he asked gently. "What do you need?" I couldn't answer him because I didn't know. I just knew that every day I stayed, I felt more like I was losing myself in his love. "I need space," I told him on a rainy Sunday morning in October. We were sitting in his living room, the one with the mismatched furniture that somehow felt more like home than my own apartment. "I need to figure out who I am outside of this relationship." James set down his coffee mug slowly, and I watched his face crumble. "Dakota, where is this coming from? Did I do something wrong?" "No, it's not you. It's me. I feel like I'm losing myself." God, even now I cringe at how cliché I sounded. But at the time, I believed every word. I had convinced myself that being in love meant disappearing, that caring about someone else's happiness meant sacrificing my own. I was so wrong about everything. James nodded, his jaw tight. Okay, if that's what you need. I'm not breaking up with you, I said quickly. I just need some time to think. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his eyes. How much time? I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month? A month, he repeated it like he was testing how the words felt in his mouth. And what happens after a month? I wish I could say I had a plan, that I had thought this through. But the truth was, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just scared of how much I loved him, scared of how easily I could picture our future together, scared of becoming the kind of woman who defined herself by her relationship. I'll figure it out, I said. We'll figure it out. James stood up and walked to the window, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I can't do this, Dakota. I can't just wait around while you decide if you want to be with me. That's not what I'm asking. That's exactly what you're asking. He turned back to me, and I was shocked by the pain in his eyes. I love you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. But I can't compete with whatever it is you think you're looking for. I should have recognized the finality in his voice. I should have seen that this was goodbye. Instead, I heard what I wanted to hear. That he loved me, that he was scared too, that maybe we both needed time to figure things out. 2 days later, I moved out of my apartment. Not because I couldn't afford it, I could. Not because I had somewhere else to go. I had plenty of friends who would have let me crash on their couch. I moved out because Bryce Morrison had asked me to move in with him, and it felt like the perfect solution to my quarter-life crisis. I had known Bryce for about 8 months. We'd met at a work conference, and he'd been pursuing me ever since. He was everything James wasn't. Spontaneous where James was thoughtful, flashy where James was understated, confident where James was humble. Bryce was a pharmaceutical sales rep who drove a BMW and wore expensive suits and talked about his future like it was a business plan he was already executing. You're wasting your time with that guy, Bryce had told me more than once. You could do so much better. At the time, I'd laughed it off. But when I was feeling suffocated and confused, when I was questioning everything about my life, Bryce's attention felt like validation. He made me feel desired in a way that was intoxicating and completely different from how James made me feel cherished. When I told Bryce I needed a place to stay, he didn't hesitate. Move in with me, he said. I've got plenty of room and it'll be fun. No strings attached. I knew it wasn't really no strings attached. I knew what I was doing, even if I couldn't admit it to myself at the time. I was using Bryce as a security blanket, a way to prove to myself that I was desirable and independent. I was also using him as a weapon against James, though I didn't realize it then. The first week at Bryce's place was like a vacation from my real life. He took me out to expensive restaurants, bought me clothes, planned elaborate weekend trips. He made me feel like I was living in a movie, like I was the kind of woman who deserved luxury and excitement. But by the second week, the shine was starting to wear off. Bryce's attention felt demanding rather than flattering. He expected me to be available whenever he wanted, to be grateful for his generosity, to mold myself into whatever version of me he found most appealing at the moment. It was standing in his kitchen that morning, watching him organize his spices with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else in his life, that I finally understood what I'd lost. James's kitchen was always a little chaotic. There were coffee mugs in the sink, herbs growing in mismatched pots on the windowsill, a magnetic poetry set on the refrigerator where we'd leave each other silly messages. It was lived in and warm and real. Bryce's kitchen looked like a showroom, beautiful but cold. I need to make a phone call, I said, backing out of the kitchen. Who are you calling? Bryce asked, not looking up from his spice arrangement. My sister, I lied. I went into the guest room that had become my temporary bedroom and dialed James's number with shaking hands. It went straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached James. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. The sound of his voice made my chest tight. I hung up without leaving a message. I tried 3 more times that day, then gave up. That's when I decided to go to his apartment. James lived in a converted warehouse downtown, in a building that was all exposed brick and huge windows. I'd spent countless evenings there, curled up on his couch, reading while he worked on one of his woodworking projects. He made furniture as a hobby, beautiful pieces that he'd give away to friends or donate to charity auctions. I knocked on his door at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he'd be able to hear it. He opened the door, and I saw the exact moment he registered that it was me. His expression shifted from surprise to something carefully neutral. "Dakota." "Hi." I suddenly felt ridiculous standing there. "Can I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. His apartment looked the same, but different somehow, emptier. It took me a moment to realize that all the pictures of us were gone. "How have you been?" I asked, though it was a stupid question. I could see how he'd been. He looked tired, older somehow, like he'd aged months in the few weeks since I'd seen him. "I've been fine. You?" I stopped. I couldn't lie to him, not anymore. "I've been miserable." James's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that." "I made a mistake," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I made a huge mistake, and I don't know how to fix it." "What kind of mistake?" I wanted to tell him about Bryce, about how I'd moved in with another man while claiming I just needed space. But the words stuck in my throat. "I hurt you," I said instead. "I hurt you, and I hurt myself, and I don't know why I did it." James walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "You said you needed to figure out who you were outside of our relationship. Did you figure it out?" "I figured out that I don't know who I am without you," I said. "I figured out that I was an idiot for thinking I was losing myself, when really I was just scared of how much I loved you." He turned back to me, and I saw something flicker across his face. Hope, maybe, or pain. "Dakota, I can't do this again. I can't be your backup plan." "You're not my backup plan. You're my everything. You're my first choice, my only choice. I just took too long to realize it." "Where have you been staying?" he asked quietly. This was it. This was the moment I had to tell him the truth. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at me. "I'm sorry, I have to take this. It's about work." He stepped into the kitchen to answer the call, and I stood there in his living room, surrounded by the ghost of our relationship, trying to work up the courage to tell him the truth. But then I heard him laugh, actually laugh, at something the person on the other end of the line was saying. And I realized that maybe I'd waited too long. Maybe some mistakes can't be fixed. I left while he was still on the phone. I wrote him a note on a piece of paper I found on his kitchen counter. "I'm staying at Bryce Morrison's place. I know how that sounds, but it's not what you think. I love you. I'm sorry." I left the note on his coffee table and walked out of his apartment, out of his building, out of his life. James called me the next morning. "It is what I think, isn't it?" he said, without preamble. "James, you told me you needed space, but what you really meant was you needed space to explore other options. You moved in with another man while I was sitting here thinking we were taking a break so you could figure yourself out." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone against my ear. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "Explain it to me, because I'm having trouble understanding how moving in with another man equals needing space." I tried to explain, but everything I said sounded like an excuse. Because that's what it was, excuses piled on top of more excuses, covering up the ugly truth that I had wanted to have my cake and eat it too. "I was scared," I said finally. "I was scared of how much I loved you, and I panicked. I made a terrible decision because I was scared." "Being scared is not an excuse for being cruel," James said. "You could have been honest with me. You could have told me you were having doubts, or that you were interested in someone else, or that you weren't ready for what we had. Instead, you lied to me and made me feel like I was the problem." He was right. I had been cruel, and I had been a coward. "I know," I said. "I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I love you, James. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I'm asking you to give me another chance." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I love you too," he said finally. "I love you so much it's killing me, but I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, love isn't enough." That was the last time we spoke. I moved out of Bryce's place 2 days later. I couldn't stand being there, couldn't stand the way he looked at me like I was his prize, couldn't stand the way he talked about James like he was some loser I'd finally gotten smart enough to dump. I got my own place, a small studio apartment across town. I threw myself into work, picked up extra shifts at the clinic, adopted a cat from the shelter. I tried to rebuild my life, but it felt like I was building on quicksand. I'd see James sometimes around town. We lived in the same city, moved in some of the same circles. He'd nod politely if we made eye contact, but he never approached me. I heard through mutual friends that he'd started dating someone new, a teacher named Rachel who seemed lovely and perfect for him. I was happy for him, and I hated myself for it. It took me almost a year to understand what I'd really lost. It wasn't just James. It was the person I'd been when I was with him. He'd brought out the best in me, made me kinder and more generous and more honest than I'd ever been on my own. With him, I'd been the version of myself I'd always wanted to be. I'd thrown that away because I was afraid of becoming someone I didn't recognize, but the truth was, I'd become someone better. I'd become someone worthy of love. Now I was back to being just me, and I'd forgotten how lonely that could be. I ran into James at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning about 18 months after our last conversation. He was with Rachel, and they were picking out peaches together, laughing about something private. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with long dark hair and kind eyes. She looked at him the way I used to look at him, like he was the center of her universe. He saw me watching them and walked over. "Hi, Dakota." "Hi." I gestured toward Rachel, who was still examining fruit. "She seems lovely." "She is," he paused. "How are you doing?" "I'm good. I'm okay. I stopped and took a breath. "I'm learning to be okay," he nodded. "I'm glad. James, I want you to know that I'm sorry, not just for hurting you, but for wasting what we had. I know it's too late, and I know you've moved on, but I needed to say it." "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means a lot." "I hope you're happy," I said, and I meant it. I hope she knows how lucky she is. James smiled, the first real smile he'd given me since that awful night in his apartment. "I am happy, and I hope you find what you're looking for." As I watched him walk back to Rachel, I realized that I already had found what I was looking for. I'd found it 2 years ago, and I'd been too stupid and scared to recognize it for what it was. I'd found love, real, honest, life-changing love. And I'd thrown it away because I thought I deserved something better. But there was nothing better than what James and I had shared. There was nothing better than being loved by someone who saw all your flaws and chose to love you anyway. I'd spent so much time worrying about losing myself in a relationship that I'd lost the best part of myself instead. I'd confused independence with isolation, strength with stubbornness, self-discovery with self-destruction. James had never tried to change me or control me or make me smaller. He'd simply loved me fully and completely and asked for nothing in return but the same. I'd been so busy looking for what was wrong with our relationship that I'd missed everything that was right. The truth is, I never deserved him. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I didn't understand what love really meant. I thought it was about finding someone who completed you, who filled in all your empty spaces. But love isn't about completion. It's about expansion. It's about becoming more yourself, not less. James had made me more myself than I'd ever been, and I'd mistaken that for losing myself. I'd been too young and too scared to recognize the difference. I still think about him sometimes. Wonder if he and Rachel got married, if they're happy together. I hope they are. I hope he found with her what I was too afraid to build with him. As for me, I'm still learning. I'm 33 now, and I've had other relationships since James. Good relationships with good men who deserve better than someone who's still figuring out how to love properly. I'm getting better at it, though. I'm learning to stay instead of run, to trust instead of doubt, to be brave instead of scared. But I still miss him. I still wonder what our life would have looked like if I'd been ready for it. I still think about the house we might have bought, the children we might have had, the quiet Sunday mornings we might have shared. Sometimes I wonder if this is my punishment, to spend the rest of my life knowing exactly what I had and exactly what I lost. But I don't think that's it. I think the real punishment would be never understanding what I'd lost, never learning from my mistakes, never growing into the kind of person who could love someone the way James deserved to be loved. I may never get another chance with him, but I'll get another chance with someone. And when I do, I'll be ready. I'll be brave enough to stay, strong enough to trust, and wise enough to know a good thing when I see it. I learned too late that love isn't about finding someone who makes you feel complete. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be better, and then having the courage to actually become that person. James made me want to be better, and I ran away from that responsibility. I won't make that mistake again. Next time, I'll be worthy of the love I'm offered. Next time, I'll choose to grow instead of run. Next time, I'll understand that the right person doesn't complete you. They inspire you to complete yourself. James deserves someone who understood that from the beginning. I just wish it could have been me.